Well, hello again. Today we're going to look at these three cameras. These are three Zorkis, and we have to look at today. We have this very early 1957 Zorki 4, which I think dates from the first year of production or thereabouts. We've got a very late model Zorki 4K, which I've reviewed in the past, and we also have this 1964 Zorki 4 model. Similar to the 57 one, but different in a number of important respects, which I will take a look at. So the early Zorki 4. Okay, this camera I recently bought and added it to the growing collection, and what I can say about it is it's the nicest version of the Zorki 4 that I've ever seen or handled. It's really very, very nicely made indeed, and it has quite a few significant differences to both of the later models. So we'll just have a quick look around. This is a model with strap lugs, which were deleted later on in production. All the markings on this camera, the name for example, and also the speeds on the shutter speed dial are all engraved, as is, I'll turn it around, as is the script on the back and the KMZ logo, as well as the serial number. Now on later cameras these serial numbers were stamped onto the back of the camera. We'll just compare with the very latest version that we've got here. And I hope you can see that in fact this number is stamped on the camera. You can see the indentations where the stamp's been applied, rather than engraved as in the early version here. The Made in USSR script and the KMZ logo there is silk screened. It's not engraved. On the earlier one it's engraved. Very, very nice engraving, very smooth, very nicely done. On the front of the camera we find that there are engravings for the script for the name, whereas on the later camera we have the silk screening here as well. And in fact, let's compare to the 64 version. Well, even by 64 we can see that things are getting a little cheaper and less carefully made. If we look on the top of the camera, the dial, the speeds are still engraved. We've actually got the later sequence of speeds on this camera. That is 1000, 1500th, 1250th, 125th of a second, and so on. Whereas on the earlier camera we find it's got the earlier sequence of speeds. So we've got 1000th, a 500th, 1/150th, and then we go to 100th, I'm sorry, beg your pardon, 1/250th, then we go to 100th, 50th of a second. So it's got the older sequence of shutter speeds. The name is silk screened, whereas it's engraved on the earlier camera. Notice on the earlier camera we have the very nice feature of this decorative rim around the combined rangefinder viewfinder window, and also around the rangefinder window. This is the window for the rangefinder that lets the light in, that gives you the slightly different coloured patch and the double image within the viewfinder. So already we've seen that there are quite a few differences already between this camera, and not too many years separate them, and they do look very similar. However, the later one is a little more cheaply made. The strap lugs are smaller on the later version, on the 64 version, whereas on the 57 version they're nice, large, chromed, very obvious strap lugs. The body, on the body covering, well, on the earlier camera the grain is finer, much finer, and it just feels nicer. This one's a little bit dirty actually. I need to clean that. It just feels rather nicer. This, I believe, on this older camera is vulcanite, whereas on the later camera, the 64 version, the grain is much larger, and in fact it does kind of look like and feel like painted metal. It may be some sort of rubberized compound, but it's I don't know, it's just that bit more coarse. It's not quite as nice as the 57 version that we've got here. One interesting thing about this 57 version, if we take off the lens here, we'll see that the shutter, I hope you can see in there, we'll see that this shutter material, fabric, is cloth in the Zorki and Leica tradition, except that where the two curtains meet here at this point, I'm not sure if you can see that, where the two curtains meet, the lath around the end of the curtain is stitched into place, rather than on the later versions where it was a simple metal strip that was just pressed into place. The stitching is very reminiscent of a Leica shutter. This is very, very much in the Leica mould, and you can really see the lineage of Leica in this camera. So we can see that those two curtains have stitched ends on them rather than being simply clamped in place with metal. One astonishing thing about this early Zorki, the 1957 version, is that it's very, very quiet in operation. It's really, really quiet. It's the quietest Zorki I've ever known. Zorkis are actually, or the Zorki 4 anyway, is well known for having a very loud shutter action. Certainly louder than the Leicas. Also rather louder than the Fed cameras, which, as you probably know, are another Russian rangefinder based on the Leica pattern. It's very, very quiet indeed, and I'll demonstrate that now. So we've got it set at 1/1000th, and I'll fire the shutter. Remember, there's no lens on this camera, so it will be a little louder. I'll fire the shutter now. And that click, if we compare, let's compare clicks. Set this to 1/1000th. And we'll set this to 1/1000th also. The mechanism on this early camera is very, very smooth. It can happen sometimes that these cameras are perhaps not serviced over the years, and it can happen that the mechanism becomes very stiff, and that's quite hard on the Zorki 4 because the winder is in a very tricky spot. You naturally tend towards this portion of the camera here when turning, but of course the gap isn't large enough to get your thumb through, so you have to do it in small amounts. If the mechanism is stiff, it actually can hurt your fingers, your finger and thumb, if you have to fire off a lot of shots. This one's beautiful and smooth. So let's just compare the sound of each of these cameras. I'll also demonstrate the later Zorki in a moment. I'll lift them up so the wooden surface doesn't resonate. So here's the very early camera, one of the first Zorki 4s made. Here's the later camera. You can hear clearly that the later camera is much louder than the earlier one. And pop the lens back on so that we get a genuine comparison. So I'll fire both one after the other. So again, the early Zorki, and then the later one. The later one is louder, more definite, more clicky. The earlier camera, the 57 camera, is much more like a Leica in its sound, in its operation. Let's now see how the latest version of the camera holds up. Of course, this is a lever wind, so we'll just wind it on, nice and easy. line them all up. So, here's the early camera. Very quiet. 1964, a little louder. 1978, very loud. That's a definite loud click. If you're shooting street photography and you want to remain inconspicuous, the Zorki 4K is loud, there is no question about it. All in all then, we've got 3 Zorkis here from 57, 64 and 78. There's very little change in them apart from the body covering and the lever wind mechanism, and I do like the lever wind mechanism of the Zorki 4K. It is much more convenient than the wind-on knob. And I also like this script, and I do like the style of the body covering. It has horizontal lines and makes the camera look, what can I say? It makes it look shorter, certainly. It suits the lines of the camera and it diminishes its bulkiness slightly. So which is the best one of these? Which is the best Zorki 4 or 4K? Which is the best 4 out of the 4 family? Well, if you want mechanical precision and a similar experience to using a Leica, this is the one to go for. A 1957 early model. There are quite a few of these about. They're not rare, they're not particularly expensive. And you do have the benefit of strap lugs on this one. And it just altogether feels like a higher quality camera. It feels very similar to my Leica 3, actually. The 1964 camera, well, very, very capable. It has the strap lugs. It has the full range of speeds. It's not a particularly good looking camera in my view, I must admit. I think the Cyrillic lettering here and the handwritten style, I don't think it particularly suits the camera. But it does have the benefit of strap lugs, and it's a very nice machine. The 4K has this great boon, the lever wind, and that really is a boon. It takes the camera into another league, it really does, despite its slightly loud shutter. So for me, what can I say? For mechanical precision, the 1957, but for an everyday usable camera, the 4K still takes the crown, in my opinion, for everyday use. But I was absolutely astonished at the beautiful, almost jewel-like quality of this 57 version. It really is fantastic. It's very, very nicely made. There are quite a few features, that is, in its construction that make it different to the later cameras. It's more carefully made and it's more expensively made. One example, if we look at the top plate here, and the shoe, the accessory shoe, we've got 4 screws around the accessory shoe there. Later versions, even the 64 version, later versions have this hot shoe riveted on it. I think that's actually a rivet, although there is a screw head at the top. If you turn that, and I know this to my cost, if you turn that it breaks, and underneath you see a metal rivet. So it's not actually a screw, it's more cheaply made. Does that make the early camera more usable? Well, frankly, no, it doesn't. But it does mean that if you love these old cameras and if you love mechanism and machinery, as I do, it does mean that you've got a very, very beautiful mechanism with which to take your photos. So there we are, just a brief comparison across the generations of Zorki spanning 21 years. Thank you for watching, and tune in again next time. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this channel. Thank you very much. Peace and love, everybody. Happy New Year.